back, everybody, to another edition of the Junkyard Dawgcast, a preview episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Patrick Brown from Vols 24/7 on with us today to preview a huge SEC opener for both teams. Number 6 Georgia going up to Knoxville to face number 15 Tennessee. 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:30 Central. ABC, big time game. And I want to say thanks to Patrick for popping on. It's going to be a good opportunity for us. Talk a little bit about Tennessee, what Georgia's going to be up against on Saturday afternoon. Learn more about the Volunteers and share some of our thoughts on what we'll see in this matchup and how this thing will play out up in Neyland Stadium. So first off, I just want to say, Patrick, thank you for popping on. And how are things up in Knoxville? How's the anticipation as we continue to count down the days until we get to see this matchup?
Well, Jordan, first of all, it's weird talking to you in September. This game has been late in the season, the last 4, I guess, post-COVID seasons, right? It didn't move until November until then. So it's weird talking to you in September, but it's been a beautiful week weather-wise. I think the weather's supposed to be great for anyone that's coming up from Georgia, or if there's any Tennessee fans listening, if you're going to the game, it should be great weather. It should be a great scene on Saturday in and around Neyland Stadium. But Tennessee, it's weird. They sort of they do their media stuff Monday and Tuesday, and then that's it. So, but there was obviously a lot of anticipation from the players we talked to. Some of them, they've been through some of these big games before. A few of the older players that we talked to, so they kind of know the drill. And Josh Heupel's very routine based anyway, so he wants his guys kind of sticking to the same plan each week, regardless of whether they're playing Georgia or if it's like they were playing East Tennessee State last week. So, but it's always different, and I think players, would tell you that, and they have this week, that it's different when it's a game like this.
So I want to take this episode to really kind of learn more about this Tennessee roster, but I kind of want to take a step back, and I want to go back to April because Georgia has the red and black game going on, and that was the same day as the orange and white game. And the Nico thing is playing out at Tennessee, and we're kind of following along as Georgia scrimmage is going on, trying to figure out what's going on. Patrick, if you think you could go back to that time, and like you're a time traveler, and you can tell your board, okay, look, this is how things look through 2 games. You're going to get Joey Aguilar; he's going to play like this, and Nico's going to do what he does at UCLA. What do you think the reaction would have been just from everything, the freak out that was April? I mean, how things have played out for Tennessee 2 games into this season.
Well, I think that a lot of Tennessee fans would be like, good. I mean, I don't know if it was as much as a freak out, and maybe I'm misremembering. I mean, you probably know from being in this business, April was 4 months ago, 5 months ago. It feels like an eternity ago. I do remember that Friday was actually probably a little crazier from our end because Tennessee had a closed practice, like a kind of a walkthrough as their last spring practice. And you're like, okay, after the report from On3 hit on, I guess it was Thursday, like, is he even going to be there? And then you start hearing that he's not at practice. And you're like, okay, now this is getting real. So it became, I think, pretty apparent Friday afternoon that it was going to be a parting of the ways. But I think there was a lot of people, a lot of Tennessee fans who were more like, not like, oh gosh, we're losing our quarterback. It was more like, okay, you don't want to be here. See ya. I mean, that was kind of the reaction from the fans. I think there was that reaction from a lot of people inside the program too, even some of the team leaders. I think they did a really good job of sort of making sure there was no fractures. And a lot of them have said, and probably would say even more behind the scenes, that whole situation, because it was a lot more than just that particular day of him missing a practice. They kind of said that all of that sort of galvanized them and brought them close together. And they probably took, like I said, that same sort of, okay, you don't want to be here, we'll go get someone else. They go get Joey Aguilar, who I'm sure Tennessee fans, if I'd have told them that's who they were going to get the day that Nico left, they'd be like, who is that? Because he was at UCLA, but he had started the past 2 seasons at Appalachian State. And I know Boone is not too far from East Tennessee, but still, unless you were watching some Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe even Thursday night Sunbelt games, you might not have seen him. So, but he has pretty much been the antithesis of Nico to this point. Very low key. He's a 24-year-old. He's really a 7th-year senior. He's only back this year because of the Diego Pavia ruling with junior college players, because he went to 2 junior colleges. He basically didn't play for 2 seasons because he graduated high school in 2019. At one point, and Georgia fans will probably hear this during the broadcast, or on game day, that he was planning to stop football and become a fireman out in California where he's from. So that was sort of where he was. And then he had some people that just kept kind of continuing to urge him to play football. He went to another junior college and went there for 2 seasons in 21 and 22. Didn't start there at the beginning. He didn't start when he got to App State. The starter in 2023 got hurt. And so he came in the first game and sort of took off from there. But he when he got here, he was really low key. I don't think he did an interview when he committed. I don't think he did much media. He was pretty low profile on social media. No pajama pants at 7-on-7 tournaments and no entourage. I guess he did have an entourage at the ETSU game last week. He had about I think 20 something family members and friends in the stands for his first game at Neyland. So that was pretty cool. But players, coaches have talked about how he's just kind of come in and put his head down and worked. He used the summer months before the team got back to sort of learn the offense, and then once the rest of the team did get back for the start of workouts and classes in June, that's when he really started being intentional about building connections with his teammates. He and the quarterbacks would take the offensive line out to dinner. They'd take the wide receivers out to dinner. He said that was, he didn't think that was that big of a deal. And it's probably not. It's not unheard of and for quarterbacks to do that. But that was a way for him to sort of get to know his teammates and sort of build those trusts and connections. And you've seen so far, they sort of rally behind this guy. I think they would have rallied behind anybody just because of the nature of Nico's exit. But I think the way Aguilar kind of is, as an older guy, very mature, very composed, and sort of his humble beginnings and having to work his way up for all the things that he's had to do in his football career. I think that also sort of made him much easier for the team to embrace it, and they sort of rallied behind him. And so is the fan base too to this point. So we'll have to see. He's played well. We'll have to see how the fan base and everybody responds if he has that first kind of bad game. And certainly, it could come this weekend because he's not seen a defense like Georgia's in a while. They played Clemson last season and it did not go well for him, but Appalachian State they weren't very good last season. So we'll have to see if he's able to continue his play from the first 2 games into this week.
So I wanted to follow on that. What has stood out to you about his play through 2 games? What has impressed you, and what are some of the areas you think he's going to have to play better and improve, especially looking at this matchup?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing probably is he really hasn't put the football in harm's way. That was a big, kind of talking point throughout the offseason was this guy threw 24 interceptions at Appalachian State playing Sunbelt teams. How's he going to handle the SEC? Well, he hasn't played an SEC team yet, and Syracuse is not a very good ACC defense. Probably decent on offense, but not defense. And then an FCS team. But he's really still not put the ball in harm's way. I think you've seen him make some big plays. They obviously had the deep ball over the top against Syracuse. That was sort of like a relief for a lot of, I think, Tennessee fans because of so many misses that Nico had last season where they had guys, they had receivers streaking behind the defense and were just overthrown. So that was a relief. I think you saw a couple plays last week. You saw sort of his creative improvisational ability. He rolled out of the pocket to the left to extend a play and kind of directed some traffic and then heaved it downfield. Now, it might not have been the most well-advised throw, but Mike Matthews ran under it, made the play for a nice long touchdown. There was another play, too, where they had a free blitzer get through and had him in his grasp. And as he's going to the ground, he's able to see somebody on the standing on the sideline over there and get it out instead of a sack right before the half. It's another first down, just a 7 or 8 yard gain. But just a play like that can be so kind of demoralizing for a defense if you do it at the right time, and it can certainly give you a boost of your offense as well. He can run a little bit. He's not maybe statuesque in the pocket, but he does have some mobility. I think the biggest question in this game is, can he be on point with his accuracy and his vision? There's been a couple plays in the first 2 games, particularly in the red zone, the tight zone, where he maybe hasn't seen what he should do. I think he made a great play against Syracuse where he rolled out of the pocket and flipped a touchdown pass to a running back in sort of a broken play scramble drill. But on that play, he had a corner out where the wide receiver was wide open, and he was looking that way, but I don't think that was maybe not his first read, so he didn't see it. And then there was a play last week, too, where I think down at around the 5 on a 3rd down, the defense was in man coverage, so everybody's turned. He had a good pocket. He had several lanes where he probably, I don't want to say walked into the end zone if he had run it, but he should have run it. Instead, he forced a throw. Turned up being in traffic. I think the receivers maybe messed up there, but he's also had some misfires a little bit. Some of those, you're not going to get many layups against Georgia anyway, but there were some layups with the way the coverage was playing in the first game that he just missed. A little wide, little high. He has had some high throws too, so I think he's just got to clean up that accuracy because as we know, when you get in the SEC, the windows are going to get tighter, the coverage is going to get tighter, and you've got more risk of passes getting deflected, things like that. So I think he's got to continue to have that accuracy really on point and not put too many passes in harm's way, because turnovers can be really important in a game like this where it could go either way, and the margins will be small.
Kirby talked on Monday about Tennessee's ground game and the fact that, usually every year they come in, they got multiple backs that they're going to lean on and count on to make big plays. Who are those backs this year, and what kind of stands out about the guys who have been in the mix to this point?
Yeah, they had Dylan Sampson, who kind of dominated the carries last season, the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. This year, it's kind of a three-headed deal. Deshaun Bishop is a former walk-on, a Knoxville kid that ran for roughly 1 million yards in high school, and is a really good story. Kind of worked his way to this opportunity. He's a solid runner. He's not a home run guy, but he can get in the open field, make some things happen. Peyton Lewis has sort of been the second guy into games. He gets the second series. He's sort of a bulldozer. He's maybe not been as effective as the first two, but a really well-built player with some power. If he gets behind his pads, he can finish runs. And then the third guy that they've brought in on the third series of games, but has been probably their best guy so far, is Star Thomas, who's a veteran transfer who led Duke in rushing last season, played at New Mexico State on maybe both of those Diego Pavia teams that won at Auburn, I think, and won 10 games in 2023. But he's been really good. Josh Heupel's been really complimentary of the jump that he made from the end of the spring to the start of camp, and that sort of vaulted him in a position to sort of add to that tandem that they had back from last season. But Thomas is a really good downhill runner. If he gets a vertical seam, he's able to hit it pretty good. Again, not a breakaway home run guy. I guess Bishop's probably the home run guy, although Peyton Lewis has some pretty elite track speed that he's just not been able to get out in the open just yet. But Thomas has ripped off several. I think he's got 5 or 6 runs at 10 plus yards so far at the first 2 games. He caught a lot of passes at his previous schools as well. So those are the top 3 guys, and Tennessee's been running it pretty well so far, but obviously going and running it against Georgia will be a totally different animal.
Looking at the rest of the offense, who are the pass catchers to know? Any other playmakers that you think Georgia fans should keep an eye on Saturday?
Yeah, we'll start at the receivers. The receivers were a big talking point throughout the offseason because Tennessee lost really 3 of their top 4 guys. Brew McCoy and was out of eligibility. Dante Thornton was out of eligibility as well. He was a 4th-round draft pick. I think he started for the Raiders on Sunday. Squirrel White transferred to Florida State. I think you might have seen him making a big catch against Alabama in that game. And then Chris Brazzell was the only one they brought back, but then it was just a youth move and everybody else because a lot of the backups from last season transferred. So they kind of rolled the dice, and they really have, again, kind of only played a top 3. Tennessee's done some different things this year formationally. I know typically they have spread the field sideline to sideline, a lot of stuff like that. They've run a lot more. They did a lot of 2 tight end stuff last season. That has remained a staple because of what they have in that room. But they've also done a lot more condensed tight formation stuff, which is a little bit different. That could be, I think, maybe an offseason evolution that we've seen the first 2 games. It'll be interesting to see what else they have. Because they've shown a lot of that stuff in the first 2 games, but I'm sure there's still some things that they haven't broken out yet. I'm sure Georgia hasn't shown a lot either on either side of the ball, but so sometimes they're playing only 2 receivers at a time. But the 3 guys to really watch out for are Brazzell, who had 125 yards last week against ETSU, a couple touchdowns. He's in his 2nd season as a transfer from Tulane. Had a big redshirt freshman season. Was kind of a disappointment last season. He's kind of a guy that's got to have his confidence going to really be effective. Mike Matthews, I think, has had a good start to the season. He might be a familiar name for Georgia fans who follow a lot of recruiting. Played at Parkview, I think, and Georgia was, I think, in the mix for him there, but was a 5-star in that loaded wide receiver class with Jeremiah Smith and all those guys. He's made a pretty good start to the season as well, kind of a physical receiver who can do a lot of different things. And then the other guy is Braylon Staley, another top 100 guy from that same class from South Carolina. He had the big play over the top in the first game, and certainly he's a guy that is kind of that slot guy. But again, they've sort of muddied the picture there, where it's not a strictly outside slot because they've used some different things, bunch formations and things like that to try to give different looks and set up different routes and things like that. So, and then there's the 2 tight ends. Miles Kitselman is he scored a rushing touchdown in that game last season as a fullback, but he's a really important player to what they do. He and Ethan Davis, another Atlanta area guy, have kind of been their top 2 there. They will be on the field together probably quite a bit in this game. because Tennessee has played a lot of 2 tight end personnel, 12 personnel. They added it to the offense last season with what they had, and they've played it a lot this season. They'll do different formations out of it. Those guys are really important in the run game for what they do because add numbers and things like that. So those are some of the skill guys. Those 5 guys are probably the ones that play the most in this game.
When you look at the Georgia perspective of this game, there are a lot of questions about Georgia's offensive line. They got some guys that are banged up trying to work their way back. But what have you made of Tennessee's offensive line through 2 games? How reliable do you think they are, and what they've been able to accomplish to this point in the year?
Well, they were replacing 4 starters and all the guys that really 6 of their top 7 from last season. And a lot of those guys were 5th, 6th, and even 7th year seniors, but none of them even got like an undrafted free agent deal in the NFL. So there was a lot of optimism, I think, this offseason for Tennessee that they could be better even with all of the new pieces. They've got 2 new transfers starting up front. Sam Pendleton is the center. He came from Notre Dame. I don't think he did not play against Georgia in the playoff game last season. He started the first 7 games at guard as a redshirt freshman for the Irish, but was kind of one of their first guys off the bench, and didn't play, I think, outside of the first round game. I don't think he played in any of their playoff run. But he's been their center, stepping in for Cooper Mays, who was an All-American last season. And then Wendell Moy came in from Arizona, just a really solid guard. He's going to be the left guard. He's played right guard the first 2 games because David Sanders Jr., their 5-star freshman, has not played. And his absence has sort of forced them to sort of shuffle 3 different positions around. They flipped Moy from left guard to right guard. Jesse Perry is a redshirt freshman that's sort of been a really interesting story. Was a 3-star, played at a small private Christian school in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and has just physically and mentally, they say he does everything perfectly in terms of just how he goes about his business. He went from 270 to 320. He wins the starting right guard job going into the season, but then he flips back out to right tackle where he spent most of his freshman year. So that's been the lineup with Moy and Perry on the right side, Pendleton at center. And then they've had Sham Umarov, who I think had Georgia among maybe his final group of schools 2023 class, a few classes ago. He's gotten sort of his first opportunity to play a lot at left guard with Lance Hurd, who's the big LSU transfer that has had a really transformational offseason, been really good through 2 games after he played through some injuries last season. So that's who they've had the first 2 games. And I think they've played pretty well. I think they've executed. Tennessee does a lot of different things in the run game, a lot of variety. They will pull everybody at different points. So I think they've played pretty physical and executed pretty well. They haven't a lot of sack, and really Aguilar I don't think he got hit in the first game. I think he only got hit a couple times in the second game on some plays that he extended. Again, Syracuse and ETSU, so that should be pointed out. But the protection's been really good. They've run the ball really well. They've played really well as a group, which is always a question when you've got so many new pieces. For this game, we'll see about Sanders. He's dealing with a bit of a shoulder issue. It kind of got banged up in Wednesday before the Syracuse game. They thought Friday he would be in the lineup. Then Saturday morning he was not cleared. So that, they had to pull sort of that was a noon kickoff. They had to sort of early in the day pull off a shuffle and move some pieces around. They worked they worked a lot of different lineups in preseason camp, and that was certainly one that they worked because they don't have a lot of depth. So that's where Sanders, I think the big question is with him, if he is playing in this game, is when do you play him? Because this will be his first college football action at all. And that's on its surface daunting to do it against Georgia. But again, this is a 5-star. He was the number 11 player in the cycle in 2025 for us. So you want your talent on the field, but that's sort of an interesting situation. And then, is he on the field? And then if he's not, they're not very deep on the offensive line. I really think they only go about 6 or 7 deep, and that's including Sanders. So if he can't play and something happened to Perry or Hurd, they'd be going to probably Bennett Warren, who's not very proven, redshirt freshman, a guy that was a highly rated and highly sought after recruit, but just hasn't played a whole lot. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll see about the injury reports with Sanders and what his availability looks like. But the offensive line is pretty good. So I would be tempted. There's some talk. There's a line of thinking that maybe you shouldn't mess with it because they are playing so good. But again, Sanders, he's one of your most talented players. So I would probably want him on the field against Georgia. But we got to see if he's even going to be cleared first with the issue that he's been dealing with.
Yeah, Sanders, another name that I think Georgia fans will remember. They were kind of in the hunt there in that recruitment. And I'll mention, too, if you're listening to this after Wednesday night, go to Dawgs 24/7 and go to Go Vols 24/7. We will have what the SEC put out for the availability reports. So we should have a better sense on Tennessee's injury situation, Georgia's injury situation as well. All right, Patrick, flipping to the other side of the ball to the Tennessee defense. Again, talking about both these teams, we kind of have to offer these caveats of who they've played. Now, at least Tennessee has played an ACC team. They've had a little bit more competition than Georgia has through 2 weeks. But who are the defenders that have stood out to you guys that you think could make a lot of plays, could be difference makers on Saturday?
Yeah, I think on the defensive line, you got to start with Joshua Josephs. He's sort of that Leo hybrid edge outside linebacker position. He was sort of the running mate for James Pierce Jr., who was the first round draft pick of the Falcons, who had 2 All SEC seasons. So Josephs had sort of a breakout season in 24. He was a really good run defender, but only had 1.5 sacks. I think he's had 2 sacks. I think he's had a sack in each game, and they need him because he's their best pass rusher, and I don't know who their second best pass rusher is. They've got some younger guys at that position that look the part but haven't quite put it all together. And Caleb Herring and Jordan Ross, who was another former 5-star guy. So, and a defensive tackle, they're a little shorthanded. They lost. They had a 6-man rotation last season, and 2 of those guys they lost 3 of them. 2 of them are on NFL rosters right now. Omar Norman Lott was the 2nd-round pick of the Chiefs. So they lost half of that rotation, and now 2 of the 3 guys that they brought back have been sidelined. We'll see about Jackson Moy. He's the other one to watch for the availability reports this week. Hurt his elbow against Syracuse. Didn't play last week. I think it's probably iffy if he's going to be able to go because that's not really an injury you want to be playing limited with at that position. But they slid Dominic Bailey down from defensive end to defensive tackle for a lot of the Syracuse game because Moy got hurt on the first series. So Bailey and Bryson Easton are 2 old heads, 6-year seniors, 2 of the few remaining COVID seniors that exist in college football. But that's sort of their interior duo at this point. They've got some guys at defensive end that's a deep position for them, so they're able to move Bailey inside. Tyree Weathersby, I think, he's from somewhere in Georgia. There's a lot of Georgia guys on this roster. This is always a big game for those guys, but he's one of them. Tyree West is another Georgia guy that I think was committed to the Bulldogs at one point. He's in that mix as well. So can they hold up against this offensive line against Georgia is always a big question. This is always such a big line of scrimmage game. Tennessee's they've been second best on the line of scrimmage in all 4 of these Heupel smart matchups. But Joshua Joseph, I think, is the biggest, I would say, game-changing guy because if he's probably the most capable of winning a one-on-one matchup. I think some of the interior guys, even some of the young guys that they're going to play without Moy and without David Hobbs, who's another guy that I think he chose Tennessee over Georgia and Alabama a couple of cycles ago. So those are 2 guys that they're missing, him and Moy, and they've had to use some younger guys and sort of piece it together there with Bailey sliding inside. But they've got to step up. But in terms of guys that can change the game, I think Josephs is probably the best one because he's a guy that can win a one-on-one off the edge. He can get strip sacks and make plays on your quarterback if you don't account for him.
Tyree Weathersby from Douglasville. So
okay, I see it. He was a New Manchester high school he played for. His high school wasn't very good, so I didn't want to say Manchester, Georgia, and get it wrong. So thank you for helping me out on that one.
And if people hear New Manchester, that is where former Georgia running back Brian Harrion played. So that's a
throwback name right there. Yeah.
Yes, it is. I wanted to mention too, Patrick, at the situation at cornerback with Tennessee playing without those 2 starters. How much concern do you think there is on the Tennessee side because of those absences, and who should we keep an eye out to fill those spots?
Really, Jordan, I think the bigger question, because they're missing 2 guys at corner and they're missing 2 guys at defensive tackle. Now, the 2 guys they're missing at corner are definitely more impactful, right? I mean, Jamal McCoy was an All-SEC player last season coming in from Oregon State through the portal, and Ricky Gibson was quietly pretty good too. I think those 2 guys, their play was as transformational for Tennessee's defense going from pretty good in 2023 to elite in 2024 as anybody. So if you'd have told me at one point earlier this year, and McCoy tore his ACL training back home in January, probably within like 2 weeks after they lost to Ohio State. So we've known for a while that he wouldn't be available. There was some talk about the offseason. Could he be back for this game? I think maybe October at the earliest at this point, if he's back, or for when he could come back. Gibson's probably going to miss. He's going to miss a while. So if you'd have told me back in whatever they were going to miss, not have those 2 guys at the start of the season, it would have been full on panic mode. But Tennessee has found themselves two pretty good replacements that have played really well so far Colton Hood is a transfer from Colorado. He was one of the backups to Travis Hunter last season, played a lot on defense and special teams. I think started a game, played pretty well against Teteroa McMillan, who was a top 10 pick, had a couple interceptions in Big 12 games, so he wasn't like stat padding against easy opponents. I guess, maybe you might think the Big 12 is easy. I don't know. But was a really aggressive, physical, confident corner. He's translated that to here. He's been a really good fit in that backfield or in that secondary. And then Ty Redmond played at Milton High School in Alpharetta, which I'm sure a lot of Georgia fans know. That program cranks out a lot of talent. I think they've won the past 2 state championships in a couple different classes. So that high school program really prepared him. He's hit the ground running. He was a high 3-star for us on 24/7. But he was, again, you would not have predicted him of all the blue chippers they brought in. He would be the guy starting first and making a lot of plays. But he's been really good too. Really long athlete. I think he's 6'2", around 190. So both those guys have done really well when called upon in man coverage. You see them all over defensive backs getting their hands on the football. I think they've got 7 or 8 pass breakups between them. So that's a position that with who's out, you would be panicking, but those guys have stepped in and played really well. There's bigger concern because there's, what are they getting out of some of those backup defensive tackles? There's a freshman in there, a junior college transfer, some other guys that just haven't played a whole lot. Nathan Robinson did make a couple plays in the Syracuse game off the bench, so that was a pleasant surprise for Tennessee. But Hood and Redmond have been pretty good. They've got another option there. Jalen McMurray was the number 3 corner last season. He's been starting at star because Boo Carter is who's probably one of Tennessee's most talented players, but a little bit of a disciplinary headache kind of issue there in July. His future in the program looked a little up in the air. So they've had McMurray sort of starting at that nickel spot, the star position. But I think if they needed to, they could kick him back to corner because he's played there. He's a 5th-year senior, and he played a lot there last season, and play Carter at star where he started 5 games last season. So they've got some – it's not just Hood and Redmond that you could see in this game. I think that would be their ideal duo. I think they would probably kick McMurray over there and play him at corner more than they would play any of the other guys that they could play there. But Hood and Redmond will be, for the lion's share of this game. If they don't get banged up, they will be the guys at corner. And they played really well so far, but they've also not faced any receivers as good as Georgia will have.
Something I'm trying to do a better job when we do these preview podcasts, especially in games that like this one, I think could come down to the wire, is ask about special teams because it could wind up being a huge factor on Saturday. What do you make of Tennessee special teams to this point, and who are the names to know in the third phase of the game?
Tennessee's been pretty good on special teams under Josh Heupel. They have a new coordinator. Mike Eckler was their longtime coordinator. I think a former Georgia assistant back under Mark Richt. He went back, I guess, home to Nebraska where he had some ties. So they promoted from within and brought up an analyst, and really haven't skipped a beat because all of their specialists are back. They have Jackson Ross, who's a very good directional punter. Yes, he's Australian. I think he's pretty close with Brett Thorson. And the thing about Ross is, I don't know if anybody noticed this last season. I don't know how many opposing team fans noticed it. He can punt with both feet, which is a really nice schematic weapon advantage. His strength is not really flipping the field as much as if Tennessee's around midfield, he could pin teams inside their 10, inside their 5 with really, really good efficiency. And what he does that rugby style, but because teams don't really know if he's going to go right or left, they're kind of able to hold the punt for a few seconds and let their guys get down there. He's really good at sort of with his accuracy of dropping it in there. So that could be good in a field position game if it's low scoring, possessions matter. There's been countless times. This is his 3rd season as the punter. This has been countless times where he has pinned a team deep. Tennessee's gotten a stop and either gotten a big punt return or gotten good field position and capitalized on it playing that complementary football. Max Gilbert is the kicker. I think he hit a 50-plus yarder in the game against Georgia last season. He had another one on last week against ETSU. So he's got some range, has been pretty good. This is his 2nd year in the role. Boo Carter changed the game last week with a lot of punt returns. I think he had a nice one early against Georgia last season. So he can be a weapon if he gets his hands on the football. They were going to tinker with him playing on offense, sort of being that two-way guy, but some of his indiscretions in July sort of scuppered that. But he's electric with the ball in his hands and probably somebody that teams should not punt to if they can avoid it. But I think that's everybody. Tennessee's been really good in the return game, particularly in punt returns under Josh Heupel. And the kickoffs, they will fair catch. Kickoffs, you'll probably have a lot of touchbacks with who they've got there. Josh Turbeville's got a big leg. So The return game should be a huge factor, but Carter is certainly capable of flipping the field and making a big play when he gets his hands on the football.
One of the things that makes the first SEC game a little bit difficult, in my opinion, for beat writers is you're trying to figure out the team based on who they played non-conference play. And I mentioned this earlier. I'll give Tennessee credit. They played Syracuse, but you look from the Georgia side, you play Marshall, you play Austin Peay. Still a lot of lingering questions for you with Tennessee. What are those questions that are kind of lingering for you going into this game that you feel like, okay, I'm going to get a better sense of this really on either side of the ball because of how they play against Georgia?
Well, I think in this particular game, it's all about the offense for me. I mean, they scored 72 last week. They scored 45. There was a fumble. There was a defensive score in the first game, but almost 500 yards against Syracuse. And again, this is an offense with nine new starters. I mean, it's a totally different lineup than what they had last season. The only guys back were Chris Brazzell, the wide receiver, Miles Kitselman, the tight end, and Lance Hurd, the left tackle. So many new pieces. You're playing some sophomores and some redshirt freshmen. You have a new quarterback that got here in May. With all the new pieces, I think they've executed and operated really cleanly, and they've produced at a high level, right? I mean, a lot of points, a lot of yards, but that's been like the whole Josh Heupel era, right? I mean, yeah, they were more of a defensive first team last season, and they haven't maybe come close to the heights of 2022 when they had Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt in those team, and that team, and even the 21 team put up a lot of yards and points too. They scored 52 points against Alabama a couple seasons ago. I mean, they've scored points at will on a lot of teams, but they have not figured out Georgia. So that's the big question. It's almost like not a philosophical question, but even just a big picture question is, can they finally get over the hump against this Kirby Smart defense? And it's sort of like, yeah, they've looked great through the first two games on offense. So that's my big question is it the opponents? And they could struggle against Georgia and still go on and score a bunch of points on everybody else this season. But it's just sort of how good really is this offense and some of these new pieces that have made some plays that have looked good. But can they do it against Georgia? Whereas some of their predecessors who, Hendon Hooker was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. Dylan Sampson was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. They've had a lot of guys have a lot of success on offense, but they have not been able to figure out Georgia for a myriad reasons. And now can this group that's looked really good again, can they go out and do it against Georgia? That's the big $1 million question that I'm anticipating and finding out on Saturday.
Tennessee looking to score over 17 points against Georgia for the first time in the Josh Heupel era. We will see if they can make that happen on Saturday. We'll take a quick break, come back and talk specifically about game week, what Josh Heupel and the players are saying, and our expectations for Saturday. I'll say really quickly for those who are watching this live, if you want to drop your score predictions in the comments, I'll rattle through those toward the end of this episode. But Patrick, we're now a few days into the week, getting ready for Saturday. What's sort of the conversation been like from Josh Heupel and the players, just their thoughts on Georgia and the expectations going into the SEC opener for the Vols?
Yeah, I think, Heupel's pretty measured in his comments. He doesn't say a whole lot, but I think he's kind of said a typical Georgia insert team, offense, defense, position group here. The rosters have changed in this era of college football. I think it's harder for everyone to keep depth. And so, and rosters just change so much from one year to the next. I think Georgia, compared to a lot of Tennessee's opponents, and even probably Tennessee itself, is probably pretty stable in terms of just turnover. But these teams are always so different every year. But, I think everybody at Tennessee knows the identity. They know what to expect in this matchup. They know they're going to get physical coverage on the outside. They know they're going to get really strong, stout defensive line, athletic linebackers. They're going to get a lot of blitzes and pressures and aggressiveness from Georgia's defense. And they know that that Georgia's going to want to run the ball, play action. Georgia killed Tennessee with the tight ends last season. Everybody kind of knows what to expect, even though these are new teams. This is an early season game. These coaching staffs have had, they've been in place for a while, And so, the continuity is there in terms of that. But something that interesting stood out to me was talking to Andre Turrentine, starting safety for Tennessee. And he kind of suggested that Tennessee's been thinking about this game for a while. Again, it's different because the last few seasons it's been late in the year. So there's been pretty high, obvious stakes in terms of the SEC, in terms of the college football playoff. I mean, last season, Georgia was coming off the loss to Ole Miss, right? Their backs were kind of against the wall at that point, and they were able to fight back. And Turrentine said that they felt like they were in that game last season, and Georgia just made a handful of plays, particularly in that second half, because it was a tie game at halftime. And they felt like that game was there for the taking, but Tennessee didn't make the plays and didn't execute when they needed to in the second half. So I think defensively that's part of where that mindset is. But I think, they know that they haven't beaten Georgia in a while, and they know that they have to beat Georgia to kind of get to where they want to get to. This is a program that has won a lot of games under Josh Heupel, 30 games in 3 seasons, a couple of top 10 finishes in that span. They made the college football playoff last season. I mean, it was Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee. Those were the 3 playoff teams from the SEC last season. So they've had a lot of success, but this is sort of the monkey off the back. And I think everybody in the program knows that. I don't know that it's quite like the mental block. Like, I think the mental block team for Tennessee is Florida, and it has been for a long, long time, because Florida's had its ups and downs, and Tennessee is just more often than not figured out how to play well against the Gators. Even when Tennessee's been favored the last few seasons against those Billy Napier teams, it's gone down to the last play. So, but I think everybody sees the opportunity that is in front of Tennessee. You're at home, you're going to have the crowd behind you. You played well at home. I think they've built some confidence through the first 2 games with how they played, and now they just need to go out there and make the winning plays that they feel like got away from them last season.
We covered a few of the injury situations, but any other injury updates, players that we need to keep an eye on going into Saturday, just because we don't fully know their availability?
Yeah, as I mentioned, Ricky Gibson, Jermon McCoy will be out at cornerback for Tennessee. David Hobbs is dealing with a foot injury. He's not going to be back yet for this game. The 2 I'm looking for Tennessee, I guess really the 3. They held Tyree Weathersby out last week. I mentioned him earlier. You helped me out where his hometown is, but they did hold him out last week. I was led to believe that was more of precautionary more than anything, but he'll be one to watch if he's on the report on Wednesday night. Jackson Moy is the other question. Again, I think he's iffy at best. And then we'll see about David Sanders, the 5-star freshman offensive tackle. My guess is probably all 3 of those guys might be listed as questionable. Just trying to follow Tennessee's patterns from these availability reports a year ago. They're almost more advantageous for the road team, because usually Friday night, they can't really if a guy's not going to play, they might not travel him because they've only got so many players. So I guess these availability reports have been more helpful from the road team perspective. But we'll see what those guys are listed at. I'd probably say those are the 3 guys that are the most questionable, or the ones that we'll see what they're listed at on these reports these next few days.
On the Georgia side of things, I mentioned them earlier, Juan Gaston and Ernest Green. As we sit here and speak on Wednesday afternoon, my expectation is Ernest Green will play. I don't think Juan Gaston will, but a lot can happen. And again, if you're listening to this or watching this after Wednesday night, go to our sites, because we will have updates from the SEC availability report. The only other one I would mention of note is Brett Thorson, who made his season debut last week. He had hurt his knee in the SEC title game last year, so that required a pretty lengthy recovery process, but played against Marshall. As far as we can tell, no issues, no setbacks there, and he will be counted on, because flipping the field will be very important in this game. All right, Patrick, let's say that things go well for Tennessee, that they put themselves in position to win this game. In your mind, what do they have to do that? What does Tennessee need to accomplish to have a shot at defending their home field and beating Georgia for the first time since 2016?
Well, I kind of think of 3 things, and I'll start with the line of scrimmage. It's that they've got to win the line of scrimmage. As I mentioned, they've been second best on the line of scrimmage in this matchup the last, since it's been Heupel against Kirby, right? And that's not getting pressure on Carson Beck last season. That's not stopping the run, for Georgia. I think of the 2022 game where Georgia just, they had like that 10-minute drive in the third quarter, right? And so in the rain down in Athens. So they've got to stop the run. I know Georgia's run game wasn't spectacular last season, but excuse me, they still, are capable of running the ball with the offensive line they have, the running backs they have. And if they're running the ball, that sets up the play action stuff to the tight end over the middle of the field that Georgia really hurt Tennessee on last season. And offensively, they've got to be able to run the football. I think you pointed this out on our CBS Sports HQ segment earlier this week that Tennessee hasn't rushed for more than 3.8 yards against Georgia. They've actually surpassed the 100-yard mark the past two games. Obviously, Jalen Wright's 75-yard run on the first play had a lot to do with that last season. And Dylan Sampson, I think, actually had 100 yards on his own last season. But Tennessee's got to be able to run the football in this game to take pressure off Joey Aguilar. So I think, and the other thing too is I think Georgia's had a lot of sacks against Tennessee. I think it was 6 in the first two of this 4-game stretch of Heupel and Kirby. I think it was 5 last season. I think after Tennessee got out to a 10-0 lead, I thought Kirby got really aggressive and really started lighting up Nico. And that, the offensive line couldn't handle it. He couldn't, get comfortable. And I think that was a big part of the game there. So I think winning the line of scrimmage is going to be key. Number 2 is Tennessee's got to hit some big plays. I was going through this before we started recording this. I think Tennessee's only hit, 4 of 21 passes of more than 20 plus yards downfield. Their longest gain last season was 17 yards. Their longest gain, and these are pass plays, in the 23 game was 21 yards. They just haven't hit the big plays against Georgia that they've hit against everybody else. And I think that's a combination of things. I think that's how Georgia plays on the outside. I think it's Georgia's ability to play 2 safeties because they've been able to control the line of scrimmage in the box with the defensive line and the linebackers. That Tennessee's offense is such a numbers game. And the reason they've run the ball so well is these past 2 seasons in particular is because a lot of teams are sitting with 2 high safeties playing with light boxes, and Tennessee's running with 5 offensive linemen and a tight end and executing really well and getting those guys to the second level where they can make some plays. So, but they've got to hit some downfield throws. That includes some, they've got to be accurate at quarterback. They've got to protect the quarterback, and they need the receivers to get enough separation. And when there's not separation, go make a play for your guy. I think that's a big key for this game. And the third one is Gunnar Stockton, right? Because Tennessee was probably happier than anybody, and maybe including Georgia fans, that Carson Beck left and went to Miami this offseason, because Carson Beck killed Tennessee the last 2 seasons. Even that game last season, right? He was coming off the Ole Miss game. That was a struggle in the rain. There were a lot of questions about him going into that game. He started off a little shaky, right, against Tennessee, but then kind of got in a groove, and they couldn't handle him. They couldn't get pressure on him. And he made a ton of plays to lead them, up and down the field on those 2 drives in the second half that were the difference in the game. He obviously had a great game in Neyland a couple of years ago too. Tennessee didn't have a very good luck against Stetson Bennett either in those matchups. So I know there's some questions with Gunnar Stockton. He doesn't have a lot of, this is his first SEC road start, but is this not just setting up for him just to have a coming out party? That's going to be the question. I kind of think that it's going to be, there's 2 outcomes here. Either he looks like a first-time SEC road starter, Tennessee's able to pressure him, Tennessee's able to stop the run, get him in 3rd and long, make him try to beat them with his arm as a passer, or he's going to, run around, scramble for some 3rd downs, make some plays off schedule, off platform, outside of the pocket, things like that, and sort of announce himself. I feel like that's the only 2 outcomes that are going to be possible here. But Tennessee's got to figure out how to stop a Georgia quarterback. That's not been the case really throughout the whole. If you even want to go back to Jake Fromm before Heupel got here, I think he had a great game as a freshman at Neyland too. So they've got to figure out the Georgia quarterback among the other several things they've got to do to win this game.
Yeah, there was a video I saw, I think it might have been from 2019, of Jake Fromm leaving interviews, and he was singing Rocky Top, which is not what Tennessee defenders or Tennessee fans want to see. All right, Patrick, looking to Saturday, how do you think this one plays out? What are you expecting to see? If you want to give a score prediction, you can, but either way, just what do you think we're going to see on Saturday?
Well, this is kind of the gif of Charlie Brown trying to kick the football, right? Like, it just seems to be a lot of things are building in Tennessee's favor, right? We don't know a whole lot about Georgia. You're getting them at home. You're getting them early in the season. The line has shifted from, going into the season was around a touchdown. Now it's down to 3.5 in some places. Some of the metrics, the FPI have sort of shaded Tennessee as having a slight advantage or a slight, being above 50% in terms of the chance to win and all those simulations. And I just feel like, Tennessee's revved up there at home, and then, Georgia, aka Lucy's just going to pull the football out at the last little bit. I kind of feel like that's, or if you want to go with the balloon analogy, the balloon has been, building with excitement from Tennessee, looking pretty good the first 2 games. And here comes Georgia to put a pin in it and do Georgia things. So I think Tennessee, this is the best chance they probably had against Georgia in some time, but I still kind of have to see it. You know what I mean? And they've got to figure out, because Georgia's just had their number, right? Particularly on defense, they've not been able to figure it out. I don't know how much it maybe grinds at Josh Heupel, who sometimes comes across really kind of low key, but he is super competitive. He hates losing. He's very I don't know if anybody watched his post game after the Georgia game last season, but really short, really kind of, I don't say snippy, but he got some questions about penalties, and he kind of turned the microphone to a reporter, right? Like, I know he hates losing. I'm sure it's grinding on him that he's not beat Georgia. He's done so much for Tennessee since he got here. He's beaten Alabama again. We kind of talked on that earlier, but this is the one he's not gotten yet. So I think Tennessee has the team to do it. But can they go out and do it? I'm a little skeptical. Sometimes we see when a team has a number, has another team's number, it's kind of hard to get out of that. So I don't know who that team might have been for Georgia. Probably would have been somebody pre-Kirby, as much as they've won since he got to town. But it's kind of that game where I kind of got to see it, right? Like, again, like, can they even score more than 17 points? And so if they were to win, I feel like it would be such a huge release for everyone in this program, because this is the game they've not won. But I still got to give Georgia the edge. I think Georgia's, their strength, or what should be and has been their strength, still line up pretty well with what Tennessee's strengths are. And you just kind of take the more proven program in this matchup to get the job done. So I think it'll be a great game. I think it'll be a great scene. But I would probably predict Georgia within a score, I think, to maybe edge the game, and maybe kind of do what they did last season, where it's a close game throughout and Georgia just kind of makes the plays in winning time to get over the line and get out of Neyland with the win. But I know Tennessee will be amped up for it, and they won't make it easy, but you've got to get the monkey off your back, or at this point it's probably a gorilla. So it's easier said than done. But I think that's kind of where Tennessee is going in this game.
Yeah, Tennessee looking to beat Georgia in Neyland for the first time in a decade. And Patrick, you were asking about the team that is for Georgia. I mean, that's Alabama. Well, you can come back on this podcast and listen in 2 weeks when we preview Georgia, Alabama, because that's the one team that Georgia struggles with. And they beat them in one big game, but they've lost pretty much all the other meetings.
Well, that Alabama is that team for everybody, though, lately. Maybe not Florida State a couple weeks ago, but – And I guess they've won 2 or 3 against the Tide, so maybe it's changing a little bit. But I guess that's the one that the Kirby's had the most issues with. He's not been beaten by a lot of everybody else, though.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So I'm going to pick Georgia 23-20. I do think that Tennessee's finally going to get over that 17-point mark that we mentioned. I think it's going to be a 60-minute game. At the end of the day, I think whoever runs the football best in this game is going to win this game. I got confidence in what Georgia's done there. Obviously, a big question with that offensive line. I think they'll play well enough to open up holes for the running backs and to give Gunnar Stockton time. Georgia fans, I know, are concerned about Gunnar. I think he's going to have a fine game. I think the biggest thing, I think he'll have an early turnover, but you'll see him shake it off and have a respectable day, a better day than he had against Austin Peay, which I know Georgia fans are just begging for that to be the case. So I'm picking Georgia 23-20. Going through the rest of our staff, Ben Wolk has Georgia 24-20. Olivia Sayre has Georgia 27-17, and Kip Adams has Georgia 31-17. So everyone on Dawgs 24/7 is picking Georgia, but I do think all of us involved are expecting a really competitive game and fun atmosphere, as Patrick said. Well, Patrick, I appreciate you coming on. I wanted to give you the opportunity to shout out what you guys at Go Vols 24/7 are working on, any podcasts, anything like that you want to let the folks know about getting ready for a big Week 3 game.
Yeah, we will have. I'll have some more matchup stuff going in depth on each side. I kind of break it up into 2 things: sort of Tennessee's offense against the other team's defense, and then vice versa. Those will be on Wednesday and Thursday. We will do, as our staff, our score predictions are on Friday, and then we'll have some bold predictions too. We kind of pick. They're almost like prop bets where we say this guy might have 100 yards and a touchdown, this, that, and the other, things like that. And then I know Ryan Callahan on our recruiting side. This is going to be a huge recruiting weekend for Tennessee. We listed, I don't know how many players in this podcast, Jordan, but how many of those guys had Georgia and Tennessee among their final group of schools? There's some familiar names for the Georgia fans that follow recruiting on Tennessee's roster. I know it's vice versa too for Georgia. You mentioned Juan Gaston's one that comes to mind as somebody that Tennessee was recruiting pretty heavily. Reading some of your stuff this week with Dontrell Glover is potentially a guy that could see a lot of time. He was somebody that Tennessee wanted. So Tennessee will have a lot of recruits on in the stands. That's always this is probably their biggest home game of the season. It is. So this will be their biggest recruiting weekend. So I know Ryan Callahan will have a full list of who all will be there. I'm sure there'll be some Georgia targets that'll be in the stadium as well. So we'll have plenty of coverage, obviously, throughout the week. We'll have another podcast too. And then we will, obviously, you guys have this one. And like I said, there's that other stuff too that we'll have on our side of this matchup that I know a lot of people are looking forward to.
Well, we'll get ready to end the episode. I want to say thanks to Patrick for popping on. Thanks to everyone who watched this live, everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Go subscribe to Dawgs 24/7. Go subscribe to Go Vols 24/7. Big week of games. On the Georgia side, go subscribe to our YouTube, Dawgs 24/7, our TikTok. Get ready for after the game on Saturday. Check out our SpeakPipe link. We want to hear from you guys. Your questions, concerns, complaints on how Georgia plays at Tennessee. I have a feeling one way or the other there will be a lot to talk about coming out of this game. So we will end the episode right there. For Patrick Brown, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.